as you grow and as you become a Christian for longer and longer, it it gets to a place that you don't have this now many natural contacts. At least I don't, and I have to make myself look for opportunities and pray for opportunities and I might make opportunities to come and share the gospel. So it takes some initiative, takes some intentionality.
Welcome to the For the Harvest podcast. I'm Paul Worcester, and as always, I'm joined by my twin brother, David Worcester, and my father, John Worcester, who's the president of Church Planting Leadership and Harvest Teams, which trains leaders around the world, which sponsors this podcast. And we've been getting awesome feedback on these episodes. One that comes to mind is my buddy Kurt Shiver, that at University of Florida, a campus minister, texted me a couple weeks ago from our last episode, and he was super encouraged. And he said, "Hey, this is a great way to summarize a lot of the stuff that they've been doing for years and seeing really exciting fruit of students leading other students to Christ." And that's what they do. They really focus on the equipping and empowering student leaders to reach their peers on campus. And so that's super fun to hear that feedback. We can kind of occasionally give shout outs to people that really actually listen to this podcast, right, guys? We can, as we hear from them. So it's not just going out into the ether. Some people do actually listen to this, so that's encouraging. And Kurt Shiver and his team actually also practice the tool that we're going to be discussing in this podcast. It's called 3 Habits for Everyday Evangelism. And really, this is just a simple tool that churches and ministries are using around the world to help ordinary believers make evangelism a spiritual discipline in their life. And so actually, whenever this podcast is released, a ebook put out by the North American Mission Board that I wrote will be put out at the same time. So about the same time, there's a free ebook called 3 Habits for Everyday Evangelism that we'll put in the show notes. That's basically like a 30-minute read that you could use as a discipleship tool to help your people get a vision for making these habits a part of their everyday life. And it also has discussion questions and accountability questions that you can weave in and use as like a one-on-one or a small group discipleship tool. So yeah, before we jump in, I want to talk about why evangelism is a spiritual discipline. And David and John, if you guys have your Bibles, we're going to look up Colossians 4, 2 through 6. If you can grab your Bible, and we'll look at that and kind of use that as a launch pad to discuss these 3 habits. David, actually, when we were in the dorms, freshman, David was leading this Bible study, and I was kind of helping him lead it. And he had all the leaders in the student leaders in this kind of bigger Bible study we had memorize Colossians 4, 2 through 6. And that's been like a foundational verse for me ever since then. So this has been so cool, the Colossians 4, 2 through 6. But before we jump into the text, why would you guys say evangelism is a spiritual discipline? And why do people sometimes not see it in that light? David, how about you take that one first?
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe there's some kind of bad teaching out there that that's basically like it's just going to happen organically. You don't really need to worry about it, and just you just kind of share as you go through life and all that stuff, like not actually actively thinking about doing it. And so, I think that's one reason that people don't really see it as a spiritual discipline because, and to be honest, I think a lot of people it's a little bit more of a challenging one for them to actually do because you do a quiet time or you pray. Obviously prayer, those are hard still, but those you can do by yourself. You can stay in your comfort zone in some ways and still accomplish those, but to really do evangelism it requires you to be able to like get out of your comfort zone. And so I just think it's one of those it's probably one of the first ones to go, as far as if you look at the wheel illustration, that it's one of the first of the spiritual disciplines because it's probably the hardest one to keep the heat on.
Yeah, totally. Anything you'd add to that, Dad, about evangelism as a spiritual discipline?
Yeah, well, I mean, if you think about it in terms of, we're commanded, like the passage we're going to read, is to be thinking about this kind of thing, thinking about the lost people in our lives. And the Great Commission even comes some implications to us. And if it's a command, then it's something that we need to do. I know for me, when I first became a Christian, it was just kind of natural. I just kind of did it. I had so much happen in my life. I wanted to tell people. I didn't actually even have any Christian friends, so I didn't have them to talk to about what's going on. So I talked to non-Christians, and we created some Christian friends in that process. And so, but as you grow and as you become a Christian for longer and longer, it gets to a place that you don't have this now many natural contacts. At least I don't, and I have to make myself look for opportunities and pray for opportunities and come and make opportunities to come share the gospel. So it takes some initiative, takes some intentionality.
That's perfect. Yeah, I mean, love that. That's a perfect segue into this Colossians 4, 2 through 6. David, you got it? You gonna read it for us here?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
So continue steadfastly in prayer, being watchful in it with thanksgiving. At the same time, pray also for us that God may open the door to us, a door for the word, to declare the mystery of Christ, on account of which I am in prison, that I may make it clear, which is how I ought to speak. Walk in wisdom toward outsiders, making the best use of the time. Let your speech always be gracious, seasoned with salt, so that you may know how you ought to answer each person.
All right, well, let's do a little bit of discovery Bible study here and talk about what stood out to us and what principles, more specifically for evangelism, do we see and think about also in creating a culture of evangelism in a whole church or ministry. What do you guys see here?
I think it
My trans
starts with prayer is the obvious one. It starts with prayer. And Paul, he's actually asking two specific prayer requests. He asked that they would pray, or three really, pray that they would have open doors,
Hmm.
also and clarity in the way that he speaks. I guess it's two, that he would declare the mystery of Christ clearly. So I think that's so those are I think two prayer requests that we can pray for ourselves as well. Like we can pray for other people, but I think it's also cool to think about how can we pray for ourselves in those areas, that God would open up doors for us and that we would also speak clearly.
Mm-hmm. That's good.
my translation, the first word is devote. They devoted themselves to the apostles to the prayer, and so that whole idea of devotion and just there's a commitment, intentionality. It's not something that just comes by accident. So devote yourself to prayer for this purpose of reaching out.
Yes, it's definitely not a haphazard, like, oh yeah, we'll get around to it whenever it happens. It's
Hmm.
devote yourself. Like when you're devoted to something, you're it's discipline. It's just that's kind of right there. The first discipline is prayer, spiritual disciplines. Yeah.
And
Okay,
then,
so
I noticed Paul, and Paul's praying, hey, you guys pray for me. But it's not just like you pray for me, but he's also, and you guys need to get into the game yourself, basically, and
Hmm.
so often we kind of like say, oh, well, the missionaries, we got to pray for our missionaries, we got to pray for our pastors, all that. But then he tells them, turns around on them, walk in wisdom towards outsiders, make the best use of the time, all
Hmm.
those
Hmm.
things. And so this attitude of prayer is the thing that prepares us to make the most of every opportunity. There's a parallel passage in Ephesians it says basically a similar thing, make the most of every opportunity. And then it says to be filled with the Holy Spirit.
yeah.
So the only way that we can make the most of divine opportunities is to be filled with God, filled
Mhm.
with can't do the work of God without the power of God. So we need God's power. We need to be staying prayerful, staying spirit filled, and that's what's going to give us the ability to actually see those opportunities when they come up. Because otherwise, they're just going to go over our heads. We're going to miss them.
Mhm.
Hmm.
Yeah, that's so good. And you in verse 5, it's in NIV where I first memorized it in was make the most of every opportunity. So that is the same phrase if you're talking about Ephesians 5, right? Where it uses the same phrase, make the most of every opportunity. And the Greek word there is kairos, right? And so that designates like a very unique, once in a lifetime kind of opportunity. It's a unique season and a special thing that doesn't come up all the time. And so those kairos moments, we got to take advantage of those. And there's nothing more important than an opportunity to share the gospel with a lost person, someone that's not saved. Like you may never get that opportunity again. And so we need to make the most of every opportunity. That one is like, that's the one that kind of stands out to me. But
Yeah, and
anything
it
else?
requires wisdom too. It's like so it's like be wise in the way you act towards outsiders. So the phrase I like to use is wise urgency. Like
Mm.
again, we see the extremes on both sides, right? There's people that are really, really wise and they're really careful. They never really share anything. And then there's people that are so urgent, they're not that wise. You know, we have to have this like kind of walk this tightrope where we're doing our best. And most people, what they need more of is more urgency. You know, they're too hesitant. They need more boldness.
Mhm.
And so I just think that's super important. Like, and actually part of wisdom is understanding how short, how limited your window of time is to make the most of that opportunity. So that I think that is one of the keys to being wise, even just with your life in general, is realizing how short, how few your moments are. As a parent, how short your time with your kids is, you know,
Mhm.
all those different opportunities. But specifically, he's talking about evangelism here. How do we make the most of those little windows of opportunity in our lives?
Yeah, Psalm
Mhm.
90, right? Teach us to number our days so that I'll gain a heart of wisdom, right? It's that it's actually wise to see the urgency of eternity and how short life is. And so yeah, that's a good point.
Some of the terms that we use sometimes is just each situation in life with somebody is a divine appointment. It's a
Mhm.
possibility to make an impact, and if we can season our words with salt, we can say the right thing that opens the door or discerns their openness, that it can actually lead to some really good conversations. So,
Yeah,
mm.
I remember reading one of the old books by Bill Bright, the founder of Crew, and I think it was in one of the transferable concept books, or maybe it was
Mhm.
his Witnessing Without Fear. And this little phrase stood out to me that he said, whenever I'm alone with someone for 5 to 10 minutes, I assume that I'm there by divine appointment.
Mhm.
And that kind of stuck with me. You know,
Yep.
it's like God's providence, God's sovereignty has allowed us to have this short window of time together. And
Mm.
so, at least kind of, what I always say is pray for open doors, but also jiggle handles. So,
Yeah.
I travel a lot, so I'm in a lot of Uber rides. So, I'm always trying to jiggle that handle during the course of that Uber ride to start that spiritual conversation. And so, yeah, that's one there. There's a couple more things I had in mind in this section here. Anything else stand out to you guys?
Yeah, I mean, back in verse 3, he's praying for an open door for the message, but notice it says, for which I'm in chains.
Mm.
So he cared more about the gospel getting out than himself getting out. And I think, in our lives, I think so often we get so focused on the details of our life and all of our problems, all of our little personal stresses, car problems, whatever it is that we're stressed and worried about. But Paul's like, didn't even care about getting out of prison. You know, really what he cared about was the gospel getting out. And however the gospel is going to get out, that's what mattered most to him. And so I think that's just a powerful example for us.
Hmm. Hmm.
It's good. Anything else?
I mean, clarity, verse 4 says, pray that I make it clear. And I think, that's another really important thing. I think some of us get uh, presentation fatigue. We get so focused on, saying the same thing, or we want a new method. We want a new, and what I've learned is the more simple it is, the more powerful it is.
Mm.
And what we use is a little booklet, or Paul, you use it where you can print it out, the gospel presentation. And what we say is if you can read, you can share the gospel. And to me, I would just say the more simple that you can make your gospel presentation, the better, because it's more reproducible. You can pass it on. Because I've also heard one pastor said it's more important to be clear than it is to be cute.
Right.
So
Yeah.
often we want to be so clever, or we want to wow people with our presentation, but the reality is the power is when the truth is delivered in a clear, compelling way, and where people actually get it. They can actually feel this is real. And so that was Paul's prayer, the Apostle Paul. And so I think that's another thing that we can really like shoot for, is like aim for clarity, because clarity is kindness. That if we can be clear about the gospel, then we can communicate it in a way that actually changes people's lives.
Yes, that's good.
And it's simple, but not too simple, but it definitely needs to be reproducible. Something
Yes.
that I find that if you share the gospel in such a way that a new Christian can turn around the next day and share the gospel with his family or friends or best friend or wife or husband, that really helps. That's where the booklet and having an easy illustration you can kind of share, that somebody doesn't have to have 3 weeks of training on how to do it. They can just reproduce it,
Yep.
get
Mhm.
those verses out.
That's one of
It's
those
so
ministry principles. Do you want to make an impression or do you want to make an impact?
Mhm.
good.
You know,
That's good.
you want to communicate in such a way that it actually they understand it and they can get it, not just be impressed with how smart or how clever you are, you know.
That's
Exactly.
really good. Yeah. And then verse 6 talks about let your conversations always be full of grace, seasoned with salt, so you know how to answer everyone. So there is that attitude of humility and grace, and you leave people wanting more, like the Pringles, advertisement. Once you pop, the fun don't stop. You just want to keep eating the Pringles. I remember David shared that illustration in India with a group, and it didn't quite go over because they didn't have Pringles or
They
understand.
didn't know, they didn't, but they know what
Or
salt is, you
the
know.
translated. But the point is, we want to leave them wanting more in our conversation. Some people are so hardcore, they just like blast people and, turn or burn kind of thing. And we do want to be bold and clear and not water down the gospel at all. But we can do that in a loving and gracious way that keeps the conversation open for further dialogue. So I
Yeah.
think that one's a good one. All right,
Yeah,
let's jump in.
I have another about
Yeah, go
the
ahead.
idea of being full of grace. Like, our message is a message of grace, and so our method should be a method of grace.
Ooh,
And so, like, the way that we share the gospel of grace should demonstrate that same grace that God has given us that
right.
we should share. And then, one of the ways that I like to say it is we need to apply the golden rule to how we do evangelism.
Mm, that's
Mm.
really
Basically,
good.
share the gospel the way that you would want someone to share the gospel with you, you know?
Yes. Yeah.
Exactly.
And then that last phrase, so that you may know how you ought to answer everyone. The idea is you're doing your best to answer the questions that people are actually asking. And
Yes, good.
and so that's kind of the starting place. You start with their genuine questions and what people are seeking. I mean, right now our society, a big one is anxiety. We end up talking about anxiety a lot because people self-identify. I have an anxiety problem. I have a depression problem. We
Mhm.
can start there and we can show how Christ is the ultimate answer to that.
Mm.
Starting where people are and tell them what they need to hear is a really powerful way to do that, to like season it with salt. And then I have another really good illustration about this is like
Let's go.
uh, the gospel is kind of like chicken. Everywhere you go in the world, people eat chicken.
Mhm.
But the difference is the way that you flavor it. So you go to Jamaica, you have jerk chicken, you have China, Kung Pao chicken's like my favorite. And then we perfected the chicken. The Christian chicken is Chick-fil-A. I'm just kidding. I like Raising Cane's better, by the way. But anyway, like it's all chicken. The gospel never changes. The meat of the message never changes, but the way that you flavor it needs to change depending on who your audience is.
That's
And
good.
we're fine with that when it comes to like doing it overseas in the mission field, but we bristle at that a little bit when it comes to doing it in America. Like the
Mm,
rules are different in America, but we need to also contextualize based on our community, based on the flock that we're talking to, or the person that we're talking to, the individual that we're talking to. And so we need to learn how to contextualize without compromise, that we can
yeah.
like, basically just share it in such a way that it resonates with them. And then the gospel itself never changes, but the packaging and the flavoring should change depending on who you're talking to.
I'd add to that everybody's thinking, and especially those that aren't believers yet, they're thinking about what is in this for me. That's
Mhm.
our minds going that way. Everybody's mind's going that way.
Yep.
People are listening to this podcast. What's in this for me? Am I going to get something out of it? Is it going to help me in my ministry? Uh, but in non-Christians that way too. So we've got to think about how do we and Jesus, of course, is the answer for any of their needs in their life, but we've got to connect the dots there for them and help them to
Yeah.
see where what's in it for them is really good thing. So it's fine to do that. And I just find some believers kind of, you get this idea in their minds that, well, they shouldn't be selfish. They shouldn't want just things for themselves. I mean, it's kind of like, no, you got to start where people are.
Right.
Yeah, yeah. So
Yes.
they're like Jesus threw out the carrot. He threw out, what it could do for them. The woman at the well, you can have rivers of living water. Nicodemus, you can see God. I mean, we just get a little mixed up on that sometimes.
Yeah, seven of the I am statements in the Gospel of John are a good
Yeah.
example of,
Hmm.
I am the bread of life, I am the vine, I am
Hmm.
the way and the truth and the life. Like
Hmm.
he basically saying, I'm the true solution to all the
Hmm.
deepest problems in your life. So
Wow.
Hmm. Hmm.
powerful.
Yeah, those would be good discovery Bible study topics. Take one of those at a week and just do those. That's probably a pretty common method, actually.
Yeah.
Um, so let's look at the three habits that are kind of inspired by this Colossians 4, 2 through 6, and they're going to sound pretty clear, pretty basic. The first one is praying daily for open doors and boldly taking advantage of them. I mean, we see that. Um, Pray for open doors, and then he's pray that I proclaim it clearly. Another way to look at this is every day praying for Bob. Pray for a burden for the lost. Pray for opportunities to witness and boldness to proclaim Christ. And so that we've been teaching people this really everywhere we go. All three of us are teaching that principle. Pray for Bob. And I recently was in Waco doing a big training for a bunch of students. And one student came up after and he said, "Hey, I really want to grow in my boldness and really ask people not only to share the gospel, but when I'm done sharing the gospel, ask them if they're ready to commit their life to Christ." And so that was the one thing he had missing was
Hmm.
inviting people to do the golden question. And he keeps texting me and he's like, or DM me on Facebook, on Instagram. He keeps DMing me like, "Hey, I led another person to Christ." Because
Wow.
he's just like growing in that. So since a couple weeks ago, he's led three of his friends to Jesus because
Wow.
he just added that little bit of boldness to ask the golden question. And that's kind of related to this idea of praying for burden, opportunity, boldness. So, how about you
Hmm.
guys? How has practicing this habit been helpful for you personally? And how has it been, have you seen it be helpful in kind of training others to be more active in evangelism?
Hmm. Hmm. I just think of the last time, I just a couple weeks ago we were back to India again, and I was out exercising. I went to the park behind where we were staying, and I was running around the track, and I saw a guy running backwards, an Indian guy. He was about a 50-year-old running backwards. I thought, oh, that's interesting. I've been studying about the brain and how that the brain gets helped by walking backwards, doing things the opposite way that you normally do them, or running backwards. And so he was doing that. And so he stopped, he was resting, and so I was going around. So I thought, well, this is an opportunity. Because I'd prayed that morning for opportunities to maybe share the gospel with somebody. And he stopped there, just standing there. So I stopped and like, oh, I noticed you were running backwards. I guess I've been learning about that. That really helps the brain. And so it just made an immediate connection with him of something that he was doing. I was able to encourage him. And he introduced himself and is very friendly, spoke good English. So it worked out real nicely that way. And and so that just led, and I asked him about his faith, and he said he was Hindu, and I asked him, well, in your Hinduism, has that helped you connect with a personal, uh, with God in a personal way, or would you say you're still in the process? So, well, I guess I'm still in the process. He's a kind of more of a cultural Hindu, and so anyway, I got to share the gospel, give my testimony, my story, got to share the gospel with him, got to give him a little booklet, Four Spiritual Laws that we use. Uh,
Mhm.
and he thanked me for it, took it home. I've been able to contact him since then. He didn't accept Christ on the spot, but he's definitely a lot closer now than he was. And we're kind of trying to keep up that relationship. So that was just an example,
Mm.
praying, seeing an opportunity, and then trying to take advantage of it.
I think the powerful thing about, praying for it is it's what we call like a dangerous prayer, right? That if you pray that prayer and God gives it to you, if he opens that door, you better walk through it because you don't know how many like, if you walk through it, then I believe that God's going to trust you with more opportunities. That's the whole thing. If
Mhm.
you're faithful with the small things, then you'll be faithful with the larger ones. And so if you get serious about praying for open doors, then you actually start to see them too. It's like reticular activating system in your brain. That's part of your brain that if you recognize something, if something's familiar to you, then you start to see that. Like,
Mhm.
I have a blue Toyota Sienna, and so if someone else has a blue Toyota Sienna driving around, then I'll see that, and I'll recognize that. And so you start to recognize those opportunities and those things. One of the things that helps me with this is this idea of, I don't know about you, but I sometimes have this tendency of like being in an evangelism mode and then not being in evangelism mode, like turning it on and turning it
Yeah.
off. And
Mhm.
like
Mhm.
sometimes I'll be like, oh, I'm at the park and I'm back, especially when I would take the little when they were littler, boys were littler, we'd just go to the park and it was daddy's favorite park. And I'd be there and be sitting there. The boys would be playing with another person's kid. And it's kind of awkward. It's like you kind of have to talk to the parent and that case, like, how old is your kid? But then sometimes I would rather just be on my phone. I'd rather be just sitting there resting. But the Holy Spirit would just kind of nudge on me, like, you need to talk to this person. And long story short, I developed a few friendships through that. And then one lady actually ended up coming to Compass Church and ended up getting baptized eventually. And so it's pretty amazing, like, just that opportunity of like being willing to just say, I'm not going to turn, even though I don't feel like it right now, that I'm going to take that step and just, be nice, be a friendly person and see what happens. So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's huge. And really, that comes down to our own personal integrity and our love for God, our love for others. It really that's a reflection of how much are we willing to forsake our own comfort, and can we be consistent in it? Because there's been seasons where there's been all sorts of stresses on me or travel or whatever, and I'm just like not in the mood, But then there's other times where I just embrace the kind of the challenge and the war, the battle, like battle, get ready for the battle. And then the Lord just brings lots of opportunities, and it's really more about your mindset and your attitude. And so when you're praying for this Bob prayer, burden, opportunity, boldness, you have to really mean it. Just like any other prayer, it's not a magic recitation. We really need to be like, God, please give me a love and a burden for the lost. Give me
Mhm.
opportunities today. Give me courage to step out of my comfort zone. And so as we're doing that, that's just one thing I've kind of even I'm still wrestling with, and God's working on me with is kind of, but then when I'm in the zone, it's like lots of opportunities come, but there's
Yeah.
times where I kind of like loosen my grip, so to speak, in this area, and I want to make sure I will make that less often. More often, I'm locked in evangelism, and less often I'm kind of slacking off, I guess, so to speak.
Yeah.
And
I
especially
think,
us that are ministry leaders that are training others and things like that, we have that much more responsibility to be faithful in this area, if that makes sense. So.
yeah. And I like what you said about jiggling handles. Like sometimes, like example is, we're in we're baseball parents right now. So like half of our life is watching baseball, but you're sitting with these same parents like over and over again. And so, taking those, you don't have to be literally talking to them the entire time. That would be annoying, but you know,
Yeah.
but
Yep.
there are a few of them. Like there was a family that from Samuel's baseball team that's now started to come to Pathways, and then they've
Nice.
developed like a friendship and things like that. So that's one example. But and then through them, it's like we're getting to know some of the other parents or something. It's just like as you're there with people, you can either be friendly or you can not be friendly, and then you can see what opportunities come up. And so that's just another example. It's like you don't have to force an opportunity that's not there. You just have to walk through the opportunity, walk through the doors that God is actually opening, but then also jiggle handles. So
That's
yeah.
great. Yes. Okay, so what about creating a culture in a church or ministry that elevates this habit? What are some kind of ways that you've seen that, how to do that? And then also what kind of results have you seen when ministries take this seriously?
Mm.
Hmm. I would say the number one thing is that we're learning is without accountability, it's probably not going to happen, you know?
Yes, yes.
And so just like we see like in our like experience with college ministry, it's those discipleship relationships where we're really asking, okay, how's it going? Who are you trying to reach out to? Like having someone who's actually asking you about how that aspect of your life is going. And that can look a lot of different ways, right? But to me, I think that's and being like on an actual team that's trying to do that together. that
Mm.
not just you that's trying to do it, but your other people are trying to reach out. I mean, to me, that's almost the only way that it's going to become a long-term habit in your life is if you have someone that you have some accountability for it.
Yep.
Right. I think what you said there is really key is that if you're in a small group of people, all of you are committed to the same goals, the same overall goal, to love God, love one another, love the lost, then and we make that commitment to each other, then we have something built into our regular rhythm of the way when we meet, is that okay, how can we pray for you this week, especially in this area of reaching out and loving the lost? How can we pray for you in this week? What's your goal to do in this week? And then they share something. Maybe they have their list or something like that they're praying through. And then the next week, we actually ask them about, well, how'd you do with that? And that seems to be the thing that has created movements around the world. Always had these, they call them a 3/3 meeting, where you look forward. One week you talk about what you're looking forward, and then you look back at the beginning of the meeting of reporting on what you did. So Jesus would send out the 70 or the 12, and then they would report back what happened. And that reporting back is part of the thing that's important. And people sometimes forget what they say the week before. So if somebody writes it down, we have in our groups that we have a scribe that writes them down each week, and then when you come back, well, how did you do on that? We'll ask them how they did, and that's that kind of encouragement, that kind of accountability, where it's very intentional and it's right there, and it's
Yep.
their goal, and it's their goal. It's not just we're telling you have to do this, you have to share this number of people, but what's your goal on this? What step can you take? And then
Yeah,
encourage them as they
and
take a
then when
step.
people do take steps, it's celebrating like they just won the Super Bowl. Like even
Yes.
if it's the tiniest little step, like what Paul says is do backflips out the window, right?
Yeah.
That's what he's saying. It's like whenever they like make any attempt that you
Mm.
just like really, and then obviously baptisms, but other opportunities that people have to share or to identify with Christ, you as a group just really, really celebrate that because what's
Mhm.
recorded gets repeated, you know.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So I think that's a really important element of
Yep.
it.
And it's important to celebrate obedience, not just fruit. So we kind of like if someone
Mhm.
even at the baseline level, did someone identify with Christ to someone that they don't know as well or don't know if they're a Christian, that's a win. If they just
Mhm.
identified with Christ, said they go to church, you break
Mhm.
that ice of the spirituality conversation, that we can celebrate every single tiny step
Mhm.
forward, and eventually they'll be more encouraged to do that. We have a group text, we talk about this a lot, but we have a group text for our harvest team that we're all in, and we throw our gospel conversations into the chat. And that provides like a little bit of encouragement to the others and a little bit of like a dopamine hit when you do say, "Hey, I got one. I can share it with the with the group." So that's a little bit of encouragement that's built in that you can just get through throughout the week as well as in your discipleship
Yeah.
group. You know.
It's
And
So
it's
like
also
when
really
you
kind
go
of
fishing,
convicting.
you get a bite. You get a bite, you're like, oh, I got a bite. I got a bite. You tell someone,
Mhm.
or you get a fish. It's even more exciting. But
Yeah. And it's also convicting when you see somebody like you, Paul. In this last 2 weeks in our group, you were saying, I share with this person, I share with that, next day I share with that person. I'm going, I haven't shared with anybody in the last couple of days. What's that? What's going on here? And it gets me motivated, gets that little competition going in me that wants me to
yeah,
be a little more alert myself. So
yeah, you just need to take more Uber drives. That's what you need to do.
Yeah, the Ubers are really helpful. It's a captive audience, they
Yeah,
have to be nice to you.
they want to get a 5-star review too. So
Yeah, yeah. So,
that's true.
all
Okay.
right. So let's talk about the second habit is developing an impact list of 5 to 10 people and then work through the prayer, care, share strategy. So this is just basically about being intentional to pray every day for the people on this short list, maybe 5 to 10 or something, and then leaning in relationally. That's the care part. And then eventually you're going to share with them. And so depending on your situation, you may share sooner or later. And depending on the kind of evangelism you're doing, discovery evangelism as a church planter, you want to get quicker to the gospel. But maybe cultivative, if it's like you're someone in your neighborhood, you might be taking a little bit longer to get to that point. So this is similar to the oikos evangelism concept we talk about a lot. Can one of you guys briefly explain that kind of oikos principle to the audience here?
Sure. Your oikos is your sphere of influence and people that are already in your life, and we have them draw a circle, put your name in the middle of the circle, and then you have branching out, you have these other circles around it. Now, these are the people at school, these are people at work, these are the people in my neighborhood, these are people, and you make some lists of some people that are there. And then as you pray for those lists, that little chart, and you say, well, which ones are showing the most openness? Which ones could I take a next step with and pray for and just look for those opportunities? But just having that in front of you kind of shows you that there's more people probably in your life than you think there are that don't know the Lord. And so you really want to put the people in there, primarily the ones that aren't Christians yet. And so you're praying for those. So we do the same thing in the neighborhood, and we'll think, here's your house, or here's your dorm room, whatever your is, and who are the five people, the five houses closest to me, and there's just a natural way to connect with those people and to see them. And most people don't even know the names of the people that live next door. We've just been doing a Love Your Neighbor boot camp in our church, and that's one of the exercises we had everybody do. They drew their little diagram of their houses, and it was convicting because a lot of people didn't know even the names of the people who lived next door to them for 10 or 20 years.
Right.
And
Yes.
yeah, yeah.
That's so
And,
easy to do.
yeah. And so anyway, so that type of thing. So it's like that. Something visual, I think, helps have that little chart to something
Mhm.
like that.
Yeah,
When
even
it
get like
comes.
a blank piece of paper and you're in the middle, and then you have little
Yep, yep,
bubbles where you write their
yep. That's
names
the
there
bubbles with the names.
and
Yep.
their connections, and it ends up becoming like this kind of
Mhm.
spread out thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's cool. And then you can kind of discern which ones you want to focus on the most, and maybe make that your daily prayer list. That could be a good way
Yeah.
to do it.
Yeah,
So,
for
what are
me,
some
I just
example? Yeah, go ahead, David.
I just have my journal, my quiet time journal that I do, and I have my daily, notes that I do for my quiet time. But at the very back of my journal, I have all my prayer requests that are like everyday prayer requests, like
Hmm.
pray for my family, pray for certain things.
Mhm.
And then on that list, I have the list of non-believers that I'm trying to pray for.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And it's been really cool. Like I've been doing this for several years, and there's a few years where I have a list and I'll have some non-believers. And one of the most joyful things is when you get to like cross out one of those non-believers, like you're no longer praying for them as a non-believer anymore because they came to Christ, so
Yeah.
that's like the best thing ever. Oh,
Mm.
another just insight for those of you who obviously, hopefully, you go to church if you're listening to this podcast, but um, I had some people that were attending our church, but I wasn't sure where they were at spiritually. I would pray for them too. So that you never know. And so some of them, so you could have if you want categories, you could do friends, family, and then people in your fellowship. Like, have friends or acquaintances from various areas, and then family members, that you want to come to Christ. That's another category. But
Mhm.
then also people even within your fellowship that you're not really sure where they're at, that you can pray for them. And a lot of those people are people that I've been able to cross out the list because it's like they come around and it's almost like eventually God's going to get them if they're coming around and hearing the word of God. But
I love that. Yeah, and you're not even really crossing them off the list. You're moving them from the impact list to the
yeah,
disciples list, the people that you're trying to help grow. So you continue to just move them, just shift to what category they're in, basically. So,
yeah,
Right.
yeah, exactly. But their name's in the book of life now, which is the most
yeah.
important.
Amen.
Well, there's one experience that we've had back to the oikos evangelism kind of thing is that we've had in the group that David and I have been working with. There was a man named Steve that was coming to the group, and he became a believer. And just on Easter, he decided he was going to be baptized, and 'cause he committed his life to Christ. And
Hmm.
his oikos, he was able to share with his oikos both his daughter, her husband, and their two grandkids that were teenagers, and they got to all be baptized together on Easter. And now they're helping to start another group,
Wow.
and it's revolving around them. And I'm working with that, and so we're multiplying our first life group into a second one. And this is one of the families that we call it a Fresh Start with God life group.
Mhm.
But it's that oikos. It's that one person who reaches those in his family or his friends that becomes very powerful. And that's just That's kind of how it works. That's what's happening in India mainly. A lot of the growth in India has been through oikos is coming to Christ and it's praying and sharing the gospel.
Beautiful. Yeah, that's so good. And that's what we can bake this into our discipleship groups as well. So you're saying, how's it going praying for opportunities? How's it going with your impact list? You seen any progress with those that you're praying for every day? And really, those two simple questions can get a lot of conversations going. It doesn't have to be complicated. A lot of times we overcomplicate evangelism training and what it means to have a ministry, but really, praying for opportunities, praying for people by name, and leaning into those relationships, that's a good start. And then the third habit is planning time regularly to just spend time with non-Christians. Some of us have that already baked into our schedule. Like David's got his sports stuff that he's doing, and I'm in the water surfing with a lot of different non-Christian guys and things like that. But also, there's been a lot of seasons where we've had to be really intentional to actually get around non-Christians because we're in this Christian bubble a lot of times. When my wife Christy and I got married many years ago, 18 years ago now, we made a goal. We were starting to practice these habits. We made a goal that once a week we would do something fun with non-Christians either at work or in our apartment complex. And so Nintendo Wii just came out, so we bought a Nintendo Wii and we invited our neighbors to come to this little get together to try out the Nintendo Wii, And I remember we were playing that game and one of the guys just lit up a marijuana cigarette in our house, and we were like, can you at least do that outside? We don't want the smell of marijuana in the house." And it just got a little messy,
That was a different
and
kind of Wii party.
yeah, 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 exactly. And so we started practicing those habits, these three habits, and then Christy developed this friendship with a girl at work named Jessica, and we also wanted to spend time with them. So Jessica was engaged to a guy named Danny. We invited them over to, actually, they invited us over, and we did a game night with them. And then months went by, they ended up deciding to get married, and they invited Christy and I to their wedding. And Christy had been praying for Jessica, hanging out with her at lunch during work, but we only hung out with them one time outside of work. But when we showed up at their wedding, they introduced us as their best friends. It was just family, and then it was us. And it was such a cool and interesting, like sobering moment to realize that a lot of non-Christians don't have, many of them are isolated. They don't have a lot of good friends. They don't have a lot of real connections. And so if we can be a good friend to a non-Christian, that can provide a lot of opportunities to share the gospel. So any stories that you guys would come to mind as we kind of think about this principle personally for you guys?
Yeah, I mean, I'm also with the surfing. That's one of my main target areas, and I have one guy. He calls me. He has a nickname for me. He calls me Preach, and like and so that's kind of cool. But I've been praying for him, and like we've had different opportunities. He said, I'm not into like organized religion, but I like Jesus. That whole thing. And I
Mhm.
basically told him, well, don't judge Jesus based on his flawed followers,
Mhm.
judge Jesus based on his own merits. And then, he's like, yeah, yeah, yeah. But it was a start. But even more than that, it was a interesting opportunity. There's another guy in the water that was kind of like getting mad at me. I actually accidentally dropped in on him, which is a no-no, right?
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
but he like kind of cussed me out, told me to leave the water. But then I saw him out of the water, and sometimes they're very different out of the water than they are in the water. But my friend was talking to him, and so I went up to him and I like introduced myself. I'm like, "Hey, I'm David," and I'm like, "I'm the guy that dropped in on you." And he's like, "Oh, did I like tell you off, whatever?" I'm like, "Yeah," and he's like, "Oh, I feel so bad." And then Shane told him, my other friend told him that I was a pastor, and he was like, "Oh no, I feel really bad being mean to nice people," and like and it turns out he's been going to a church in the area. And like, so I think like God used that to like not only break the ice, so for me to, get back at that spot, but also that, me kind of humbling myself and apologizing, was like a good example for him as a Christian, because he's trying to, at least trying to explore faith at this point, be a Christian. And so anyway, that was just like a kind of a God moment in that oikos, that, or not oikos, but that air pocket of people that I'm trying to
Mhm.
reach into. So
That's
Hmm.
great.
yeah.
Well, I know for me, it's I don't have those natural situations where I'm around non-Christians as much right now. I'm kind of isolated either in preparing for things or um, with Christians and people and leaders and stuff that I have to work on. Something that I have to work on. How am I going to be intentional? What am I going to do? How am I going to create something? And I need to get a better rhythm in my own life on that one. So. I need to
Mm.
work on that when I travel and on planes and stuff, provide it. But that's, like to have more of it. We do walks in the neighborhood. We meet people. That opens up some doors and has opened up some doors in the past. But so anyway, it's just a little
Yeah,
tougher.
it's hard.
It's a challenge.
Especially when you
Um,
add just the busyness of life and all the moving parts and
yeah.
for a long season, Christy, my wife, she still has a bad back, but it's a lot better in Hawaii. But there was a long season, young kids, growing ministry on campus, all these other things. It was hard to find space for that relational evangelism side of things of hanging out with non-Christians. So it's every season of life is different. And so but the key is intentionality. I know in the past, you guys, and I, even recently, you've done things where you invited neighbors over to
Oh
have them
yeah.
for dinner and things like that. And whenever you moved I remember we would move into a place to plant a church and you would do a welcome party for yourself. So
Yeah,
Right.
you would
Yeah,
say,
that's
"Hey, come
right.
over to our house, and we love to meet you guys." And that's a good way to like say, "Hey, we're here. We want to relate to you guys," and
Yeah,
things.
yeah. Christmas parties worked really, really well like that also. We're new to the neighborhood. We just have a Christmas open house in our house and we would just put out invitations to people we didn't even know and people would show up. We'd have 25, 30, 35 people show up at
Hmm.
our house that we didn't know and it opened the doors. So just trying to be creative to figure out a way to connect with some people.
what
Yeah,
I
It's
and
found
happened
is
several
it's
times.
easier to do it either by yourself or with your Christian, like have if you have like a hobby or something like that, or with a Christian friend that you're like can, but if takes a little extra planning and organization, but if you can make space for that and try to like be intentional, or even just going to the same, like for me, like going to the same surf spot every time, I'm able to see those same people. But if I went just wherever the waves happened to be good that day, I wouldn't be able to build those same types of friendships. And so for
Right.
sometimes also going to the same coffee shop, going to the same whatever it is, you can start to build relationships with people that way. But again, that's more the long-term relational evangelism approach, but it's still a good approach. So
yeah, for example, one of the people on my impact list is a woman named Ginger that's at the food land that I go to. It's kind of like a Safeway in
yeah.
Hawaii, but it's all the time I'll go there and I'll see her every time. Hey Ginger, how you doing? And she's super friendly and and she's come to our church a couple times. And so it's kind of this cool, you just see the same people, get to know people's name and greet them by name, even if it's in a short, 30-second moment, you can kind of build those 30-second, 1 minute conversations up to kind of get to know people. So, all right, so let's kind of think about big picture, zoom out. What are some ways, like here's, for example, in Chico, the ministry there that we led for a long time, our student leaders ask accountability questions on these three habits every week. So every week they're in a little group during our weekly core team meeting, and they're saying, "How's it going praying for non-Christians? How's it going with your impact list? Have you seen any opportunities to share your faith?" That sort of thing. And now we also in Hawaii we have the discipleship groups that we lead, and every week we're asking those same questions. We've actually baked those questions into the weekly rhythm of the discipleship groups that are happening on North Shore up here. So, what are some ways, in addition to those kind of ideas, any other ways to kind of bake accountability and celebration into a church or ministry, or especially around these three habits you guys can think of?
Yeah, I mean, our life group, every life group that we do, we have what we call an open sharing time,
Mm.
where we after we do the first looking back part, where we split up the men and women, we all come together, and I just say, hey, we're gonna have our open sharing time. Does anyone have an answer to prayer, an opportunity to share, or a word from the word that you'd like to encourage our group with. And it's like just it's really fun. Like it's an open idea. And like it's been really cool to see these like new Christians that they're like, oh yeah, I got to like identify with Christ at my work, and I got to, whatever, share with this person. And to me, it's just every week having that time where you're even just mentioning that anyone have an opportunity to share or an answer to prayer is really cool, fun too, to hear the stories of people's like answers to prayer. And then it's also an opportunity to like encourage each other. So if your group doesn't have that kind of open sharing time, I highly recommend it.
Yeah, the mid-sized groups, like the life groups or whatever you call
Yep, yep,
those,
that's
community
right.
groups. So discipleship groups, that can be a little bit more pointed, a little
Yep,
more hardcore. The mid-sized groups, you can do like an opportunity to celebrate those type of things. Anything else? Any other ideas on that?
mhm, mhm.
Yeah, well, if you have a large group too, if your church has a larger, you can weave in stories and
Testimonies
celebrate
are, yeah,
testimonies.
testimonies are huge.
Mhm.
Testimonies are huge. So whenever you can get a testimony, or when you do a baptism or something like that, if you can get the person to share a testimony, and then maybe how they found out about the gospel and who talked to them, and they can show the connection between their testimony and then somebody else that reached out to them, maybe in the church.
Yeah, and
Mhm.
one thing I love to do is even have the person that led them to Christ do the baptizing.
Yeah,
So
that's great. Hmm.
they're telling their testimony. This so and so shared with me and invited me to church, and then I gave my life to Christ. And then the person that they just were talking about is the one
Yep,
that's
that's
doing
right.
the
That's
baptizing.
huge.
That's
That's
powerful.
I love that.
yep, that's right.
All right,
Good.
so no tool or strategy is perfect. This isn't comprehensive, but we created these three habits to be simple, memorable, and reproducible. What kind of barriers or kind of things that you might see or kind of that we're missing with just if we just did these three habits, is there anything that you see that what other tools, tips, and strategies should we keep in mind as we pursue these three habits?
Yeah, I mean, the way I think about it, these are like the three habits that would be for the individual, but I
Hmm.
also think we need to think corporately as, again, whatever your life group has a mission that you're trying to reach, whatever a neighborhood is, or whatever demographic that your life group is, but then also for as your church, if you have a larger church, then in having a place where you can invite people collectively, you're working together to share the gospel and invite people in too. So I think there's the team approach to evangelism where everyone has like an opportunity where they can serve, they can give, they can be a part of like the overall mission of what we're doing as a church. And then this is the sent part of it where like they're sent out to do mission on their own, but then also having opportunities where they can come and they can celebrate those stories, but then also hear invite people to hear the gospel in other ways too, which is if that's like if you have a large group, then that's a good opportunity for that too. So
We mentioned it just briefly early on, but just realizing that different people have different kinds of callings. And some
Hmm.
have that calling and they're an everyday disciple and they're having that relational evangelism, the cultivated evangelism we talked about a lot in this podcast. And that's huge. Everybody ought to be doing some of that, both. And but then you also have some with this kind of a special calling to start new things and to be more evangelists. And now they're they probably already wore through all their close relationships and neighbors. And now they've got to figure some way to reach out to somebody new, meet some new people, and creative ways to do that, which is something I've had to do most of my life now. Is had to do a lot more creative ways to start relationships and get to share the gospel with people.
Yep. And that's what we call that discovery
Discovery
evangelism.
evangelism. Yep,
Yeah.
that's right.
And
That's
that's
both.
actually the first episode of the For the Harvest podcast. So if this is one of your first episodes listening to us on this podcast, go back to the beginning and start work your way through these episodes. We've been building kind of a philosophy of ministry throughout the, 13 or so episodes. I don't know how many episodes we've done, but we've
Like
kind of built some momentum here. And so, but if you're new to the podcast, make sure to go back to the beginning and you can use these as like a way to discuss with your staff team or your small group and kind of work through and grow in your understanding and vision for evangelism. And so, yeah, I think that's a good place to close it down, any last words on this, you guys?
Yeah, and just don't forget about the book, the ebook that Paul put out. And if you get the ebook, we'll give you a free podcast episode. You get to listen to a podcast episode for free. So
Yes, it's all free, right?
yeah.
So that's the beauty of it. And it's written for anyone. So you can use it, you can send it to your whole discipleship group, all read it together and work through it as a discipleship tool there. So yeah, if these episodes have been helpful for you guys, send a link to a friend. We've been seeing people do that. That's been encouraging. And then leave a review on whatever, Spotify, Apple, wherever you listen. And let us know. Give us a DM or a text and let us know what guests or topics you would like us to cover. We want to start bringing in more guests as well. So we're really grateful that a way God is using this. And we're praying that God will just continue to bless you guys and that we just see every harvest field, more laborers raised up, and because that's our heart. We just want to see more people reached with the gospel. And so, yeah, until next time, God bless.